Look at this beautiful, beautiful beer. I just love the color of Dunkels, the character of them. They're just so aesthetically pleasing to look at. Just fantastic beer experiences every time. So my friend, we have to tackle, we've had so many informative Inside the Brackets episodes where we've tackled different styles of beer, giving people a little bit of a background of what they are. So if you're just starting your beer exploration journey, at least you can have a little bit of a base to work with on what these different styles are. So now it's about time, about 3 years into our beer journey here, that we finally, even though we've reviewed some Dunkels and we've talked about some Dunkels on the channel before, I think we need to let everybody know, what is a Dunkel really? For somebody who's, new to the beer world, starting off in their beer journey, what would you tell them?
It's a great question, my friend. So
Thank you.
Dunkel, first of all, the word Dunkel means dark in German.
Very dark.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is that, when you do some beer research and go through those like old books, dusty books of beer history, you actually find out something very interesting. One interesting thing
My wife won't be happy about that.
You easily find out is that historically all beers used to be darker than what we're used to today. So that's actually the original way that beer used to be in the old days.
In the olden beer days.
There's a simple explanation to that. Exactly.
The elder beer days. When beer would be drank out of tankards made of clay.
Yeah. Back in the days, like when, there was not many options in the way that malt was made. So the roasting process of the malt was like with fire and smoke. It would have like a lot of times have smoke presence into it, but it also it tended to be a little bit darker because there was not much temperature control on the malting process of the barley. Most beers were actually dark. Once the Industrial Revolution came about and it became possible to actually create some malts that had like a lighter and more controlled malting process with a lower temperature that would generate malts that were lighter in color, and that's the generation of all the Munich Helles, the Pilsner that came about like around the 1800s. That made a distinction, obviously, because those beer become extremely popular very, very quickly, and they took over most of the beer, the beer market, let's call it. And consequently, there needed to be a distinction. That was a default beer was the Pilsner / Helles lager style beer that was lighter color, and then you had the older style beer that were darker. So that's how the name came into play, the Dunkel.
So do you know by any chance why Munich Dunkels, that style, why Germany in particular is so famous for their Dunkels? Do you have any idea how that history intersects there?
Well, there's different reasons. Who brought lagers into fame were actually Germans, specifically in Munich and in Austria, were the two countries that brought the lagers into the world's attention. The two breweries that started that were one is no longer in existence, but Spaten, it's one of them. And they were the first ones who actually brought attention into that style, because before then it was a style that was very well known in Germany, but not so much abroad. The style started spreading, and there's actually a lot of connections once you start researching into the beer history. So, for example, that style generated in Bohemia generated the Pilsner style, right? Around that same time. The difference of having a more of a hop presence and being from the town of Pilsen, that uses more of the Saaz hops, so consequently a little bit more hop presence there. And that created as a counter effect, some of the older Abbey style beer made the production of the triple, which is, as we very well know, it's a style that is lighter in color that uses Pilsner malt. And all that germinates from the way that malts were treated. So the Industrial Revolution and the German knowledge of how to make lagers made it possible to have malts that were lighter in color, that then became used into Pilsner style beers that then became popular together with others. and it made a difference compared to other beers that were produced in Germany before.
There you go. It's so interesting. Like we learned when we did the Hofbrau Dunkel review is that the Dunkel was actually the first beer served at the original Hofbrau house in Munich. So that was the original style that they actually put forth and served out publicly. Whereas now, if you think of Oktoberfest, if you think of the, going to Munich to have a beer in the Hofbrau house, you think of something that's a little clearer, you think of something that's a little lighter. But really, the Dunkels were the original style that were popular there and that were served, which is so fascinating. So thank you so much for that, man. That was like an amazing background to the style. But for anybody who's just wondering, okay, well, how does this sort of apply to the beer that I'm drinking right now in terms of the production of it? Well, Sandra definitely touched on that. I think the big thing to sort of summarize for people like me that are a little bit more simplistic in their beer journey, in the way that they think about beer, you could say Modelo Negra, the one that we have in front of us here, they use what are called caramel malts. So they use a slightly different kind of malt that has that sort of darker, more caramel sweet flavor. But also they say it's brewed longer than the standard, let's say, Pilsner like the Especial is. So you're kind of cooking those malts a little bit longer to get the darker color and the darker flavors, right? Think about like a piece of bread. If you have a white piece of bread, you eat that raw, it has a certain light taste to it. If you pop it in the toaster for 30 seconds, of a slight bit of toastiness to it. Put it in there for a minute, it'll be a lot darker and a lot more bready and toastier, right? So you can think about it that way if you're approaching the Dunkel style and the differences. That's the main thing to think about there. That's great. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you've had some good Dunkels in your life, and if not, if you're thinking about approaching the style, Modelo Negra is a good one to start with, or the Erdinger Dunkel, which sits on the beer bracket perfect beer round table. You can try that one out as well. But cheers.
Cheers, everybody.